A man who survived two separate drive-by shootings, buried his two best friends in the same year, battled a life-threatening blood disorder his entire life, signed to one of the most powerful labels in hip-hop, and was 4 weeks away from the biggest show of his career, is gone. Not by the streets, not by the disease, by his own hand. At 25, behind the Almost Normal Again album title, behind the CMG deal, behind the 247 million Spotify streams, Janarious Wheeler was running on borrowed time emotionally. And if you actually listened to his music, not just heard it, you already knew that. The signs were never hidden. They were the music. The truth behind what really happened to Lil Poppa is darker and more layered than any blog covered in their 2-day tribute cycle. Because this isn't just a story about a rapper dying young. This is a story about what happens when the trauma that builds your career is the same trauma that quietly destroys you. And nobody around you has the tools to tell the difference. Yo, what's good, fam? Welcome back. Today we're going deep into one of the most complex situations this culture has seen in a long time. No surface level takes, no reposting what everybody else already said. We're going all the way back to Jacksonville, all the way back to 2018, and we're laying out the full picture of what really happened to Lil Poppa. Now, before we get into this, let me keep it 100 with y'all. When the news broke, a lot of people wanted to make this simple. They wanted a clean narrative. Overnight success, tragic end. But that's not what this is. Lil Poppa's story doesn't start with a record deal and end with a headline. It starts in Evergreen, on Jacksonville's Eastside, with a kid who was already fighting for his life before the streets ever got involved. 2018. That's the year that changed everything for Janarious Wheeler. And understand, he was only 18 years old, already battling sickle cell anemia since childhood, already building buzz locally, already pouring everything he had into music. Then one night, riding with his two closest friends, a drive-by happens. All three get hit. Only one walks away. That one was Poppa. And from that night forward, every single thing he created was colored by the question he could never answer. Why me? Now hold up before y'all start thinking this is just another street casualty story, because it's not. Lil Poppa wasn't a statistic. He was a Billboard 200 charting artist. He had a son. He had a partner in Toy Roberts. He had Yo Gotti's full machine behind him. By every external measure, this man had made it out. But here's where it gets real spicy. Making it out of the streets and making it out of what the streets did to your mind are two completely different things. So check it. 2018. Lil Poppa is 18 years old, Eastside Jacksonville, already known in his neighborhood as the kid who could rap. Not just rap, feel rap. He starts recording as early as age 7, sets up a home studio as a teenager, and by the time he's 17, he's got real local momentum building. Then the drive-by happens. Two of his closest friends, the people he grew up with, recorded with, moved through life with, are gone, just like that. And Poppa is left standing. Now in the hood we understand that kind of loss. But what we don't always talk about is what comes after surviving. Because surviving ain't the same as living. And for Poppa, the way he chose to survive was by documenting everything in his music. Still in 2018, the same year he watched his friends die, he drops Purple Hearts, a raw, first-hand, unfiltered account of exactly what happened that night. That song becomes his identity, his breakout, and, let's be honest, his open wound that never fully closed. Now in the streets and in the culture, we know what it means to keep it moving. You don't stop. You don't show weakness. You rap about your pain, which somehow makes it acceptable to have it. But you don't actually sit with it. You don't actually process it. And for artists like Poppa, who built their entire brand on emotional transparency, there's this cruel irony where expressing your pain publicly can actually make it harder to address privately. Because now your grief is your product. Your trauma is your stream count. And every time you perform Purple Hearts in front of 1,000 people, you're not healing, you're reopening. But yo, this is where the story gets deeper than just losing his friends. Because in June 2019, less than a year later, Lil Poppa gets shot again. This time he's riding in an SUV in Jacksonville. He survives again. 2 shootings before age 20. 2 survival stories that would traumatize most people permanently. And what does Poppa do? He goes back to the studio. Listen to his music post-2019 and tell me it sounds the same as pre-2018. It doesn't. Eternal Living, Love and War, Stop Grieving, these aren't just titles. That's a man narrating his own psychological state in real time, and the fans who were really locked in heard it. They felt it. But the industry hears authentic pain rap and sees streams, not a warning sign. By 2021, Blessed, I Guess, drops with a full documentary. This is the moment, the most honest, most transparent moment of his public career, where Poppa directly connects his sickle cell diagnosis to his mental state on record. He's not just rapping about the streets anymore. He's rapping about being physically exhausted, emotionally exhausted, and spiritually uncertain. The album hits number 160 on the Billboard 200. The documentary gets viewed by hundreds of thousands of people. Everyone talks about how real it is. Nobody asks him if he's okay. Then 2022, Yo Gotti's CMG signs him. And look, this is real. That's validation at the highest level. Under Investigation 3 debuts at number 194 on the Billboard 200. Heavy as the Head hits number 4 on Heat Seekers. The machine is working. On paper, Lil Poppa has arrived. But here's the real kicker, though. The album he just signed to a major label is called Heavy is the Head. The man is telling you everything in the title. Fast forward to 2025, Almost Normal Again drops. 16 tracks, career-high streams, 247 million on Spotify. Spring 2026 album already in pre-production. A show booked at the Fillmore, New Orleans for March 21st. Days before his death, he drops Out of Town Bay. New video, new content. Everything looks like a man on the way up. But let me ask y'all something. The album is called Almost Normal Again. Not normal again. Not back to normal. Almost. That qualifier is doing a lot of work. And when you go back and actually sit with that project knowing what we know now, it sounds like a man describing the ceiling of his own recovery. Like he got as close as he could get and couldn't bridge the final gap. The real kicker, though, in his final days, Lil Poppa was in Fulton County, Georgia, not Jacksonville, not on tour, not in a session. He was away from his home base, and the Fulton County medical examiner confirmed what nobody wanted to accept. Gunshot wound to the head, manner of death, suicide, official, on record. But the days before that, his Instagram was telling the story, a story post. First we're born, next we suffer, then we die. The end. A separate story saying he was looking for peace of mind. And at the same time, videos dropping, a tour active, a label rollout in motion. That's the face of someone performing okayness while privately at the edge. And that performance is so common in this culture that most people scroll right past it. Now here's where people started connecting the dots. And once you see it, you genuinely cannot unsee it. Go back to Purple Hearts in 2018. Then trace the discography forward. Every project title carries ambivalence. Every album has at least one track where he's explicitly questioning whether survival was a gift or a curse. Stop Grieving, a song where he's essentially giving himself instructions he can't follow. Eternal Living, a man who watched two people die young, contemplating what eternal means. The internet went crazy when fans started pulling these threads after his death, because it wasn't a reach, it was a through line. 8 years of music that was, in hindsight, one long conversation about whether life was worth the weight of surviving it. For y'all who might not fully understand what sickle cell anemia actually means in daily life, let me break it down. This is a genetic blood disorder that causes chronic, severe pain crises that can land you in the hospital with no warning. It affects life expectancy. It creates a complicated relationship with your own body, a feeling that your physical existence is fundamentally precarious. Poppa dealt with this from birth, on top of everything else. That layer of his story has been almost completely absent from mainstream coverage of his death. But think about what it means psychologically to grow up knowing your body might fail you at any moment. Lose 2 friends to gun violence at 18, get shot yourself at 19, and still be expected to perform, promote, and produce music at a commercial level. The sickle cell wasn't separate from his trauma. It was woven into it. Now some people pushed back on the narrative, said he was thriving, said almost normal. Again was his best work, said this came out of nowhere. And to those people, with respect, you're confusing output with okayness. Some of the greatest artistic output in history has come from people who were using creation as a last resort coping mechanism. The quality of the album isn't evidence that he was fine. If anything, when a pain rapper starts sounding more polished and more resolved, sometimes that's not growth. Sometimes that's a man who's run out of new ways to say what he's been saying since he was 18. But the streets knew better. The fans who had been with him since Purple Hearts, they weren't surprised by the Instagram posts. They were just hoping it was another dark night that would turn into another great song. At the end of the day, Lil Poppa's situation isn't just about one man's tragedy. It's about what this culture demands from its artists and what it fails to give back. He gave Jacksonville a voice. He gave hundreds of thousands of people a soundtrack for their grief. He turned his worst nights into art that genuinely moved people. And in return, the industry gave him a record deal, a promotional budget, and a tour schedule. Nobody gave him a real framework for processing what happened in 2018. Nobody in his professional ecosystem had the tools, or maybe the incentive, to recognize when the therapy became the wound. Because as long as the music was selling, the pain was an asset. The moment it became a liability was the moment it was too late. The real question now sits in a few different places. There's a spring 2026 album that was in pre-production. What happens to it? Does CMG release it? What does it sound like knowing everything we know now? There's a son, PJ, who is growing up with a father's entire emotional autobiography available on Spotify. There's a Fillmore New Orleans show on March 21st that now becomes a tribute. And there's a Jacksonville hip-hop scene that just lost the person Lil Duval called the one everybody else wanted to be. But the bigger question, the one this culture keeps refusing to sit with, is how many artists right now are doing exactly what Poppa was doing. Dropping content, hitting streams, performing sold-out shows, while posting existential quotes at 2 a.m. that their team writes off as the aesthetic. How many Purple Hearts have to become eulogies before the industry builds something real around mental health? Not a PSA, not a charity partnership, but actual infrastructure for the people making the music that funds the whole machine. I want to hear from y'all on this one. Drop in the comments. When did you first hear Lil Poppa? And be honest, did you ever listen to his music and feel like it was a cry for help, or did it just sound like great rap to you? Because I genuinely think that question is the conversation we owe him now. Not the 2-week tribute cycle, not the playlist ads. The actual conversation about what we're asking artists to carry and what we're giving them to carry it with. Rest easy, Janarious. Purple Hearts was real. All of it was real. And that's exactly why it mattered. Next video, we're going deep on the posthumous album situation, what CMG is reportedly planning, and whether releasing it is the right call or just the label protecting their investment. That conversation is way more complicated than people think, and we're going to get into all of it. Click on the video on screen right now if you want to go deeper on the artists we've lost too soon and the systems that failed them. Stay locked in.